welcome back to my channel. So I have been talking endlessly about making these panels and doing all this hand beading and such on them, and I thought it was finally time to catch you up to speed on how I'm making them, because I am like 50% of the way done with the 5th panel. There's only 2 left, so we are nearing the home stretch. It's so funny to think back. I think in March I was like, yeah, this will only take me like 4 or 5 weeks to do. I was so wrong. I also didn't factor in the fact that I would not want to sit there and hand bead for like 6 weeks straight. It is mentally taxing and I'd want to do other things. I also didn't factor in needing to spruce up Ravenna for a contest. So my poor planning has led to it being mid-June and I'm still not done. But I am almost there and I'm very excited to share with you the process, specifically on the embroidery, because I will go over the actual construction of the panels once I have them fully completed. There's still quite a bit more work to do before this panel is finished, and I'm waiting until I have done all the hand beading on all of them first before I go in and glue on the rest of the gems and do whatever else I need to do. So let's talk about how I did this embroidery. So if you wind up liking this video, make sure to hit the like button. If you have any questions about the process, make sure to drop them in the comment section below and subscribe for more content from me. And with that, let's hop on into it. So the very first thing I needed to do is figure out what on earth this embroidery should look like. So I took the cover of the Enchanted Witch book by Sakizo and I sat down and I just sketched out an idea of what I think it should be. It's not clearly defined, all the details in the cover. And while this dress does show up in several other places within the book, as well as in separate artwork that she has done, the design of this embroidery changes in every single image. So I decided that my costume is going to be specific to the cover. With that, I wanted the embroidery to be as close to the cover as possible. So I just sat down with an ink pen and a piece of paper and I sketched out 1/2 of what I thought this should look like. Once I had that finished, I took a photo of it and I took it into Illustrator and I traced it all again, and then I mirrored it over along the central axis. This allowed me to duplicate the left side and flip it over onto the right. So now I have one full design. I did have to go in and connect the lines at the points where I mirrored it, and I made a few additional tweaks to make it look a little better. But that was how I got my digital design. Now I needed to make sure that this got scaled to the appropriate size. So I actually took one of my cutout panels and I put it on my cutting table, which is right behind me. This cutting table has a grid on it laid out in inches. So every square on this table is an inch. So I took my panel and I lined it up on the cutting table in the corner and I took a photo and I uploaded that photo into Adobe Illustrator. That photo with those grids allowed me to know the exact size, the exact height and width of the panel. I'm able to count out the amount of squares going vertical and then horizontal, and that gave me the exact measurement. I could have just used a ruler, but I thought this was easier. So I traced the panel and resized it to the measurements from that image. And then I took my embroidery design that I had just made and I moved it over onto this panel and I resized it to where I thought it looked the best on that panel. And then I deleted the outline of the panel itself, and that is my completed embroidery design in the correct size. So I outputted that file and then I switched over to my Bernina 9 embroidery software. So I have used Hatch before. It seems to be relatively the same as Bernina 9. I haven't noticed too much of a difference. Granted, I only used Hatch like once or twice, so take that for what you will. And this was my first time using the Bernina 9. It came with my sewing machine, so I thought I'd use it. So I uploaded it into the Bernina software, and the Bernina software is incredibly easy to use. You have a selection of stitch types on the bottom of the screen, and then you have other tools on the left. I have no idea what I'm doing at this point because I have never really used this software, so I just played around until I got something that I liked. I played around with stitching types, I played around with filling, did some puffing, which has your machine stitch a bunch of times in the same spot so it lifts that part of the design up and creates a 3D type texture. I just played around until something looked right on the screen. Then I realized because of my hoop size, the limitations of my machine, I actually needed to cut the image up into 3 pieces. So I followed along on lines where I thought it made the most sense, where I thought it would be the easiest to piece this back together and make sure that it was the exact same every single time. So this is the top piece, and I thought it made sense to cut out 1 leaf and then cut out everything below this line. This is the largest piece, and this is the largest of the design that I could fit in the embroidery hoop. So I thought that this would allow me to line up the next piece, which would contain information here and here, and then line up the 3rd piece. So this is the top, this one is the left side, well, right side. So we have the 1 leaf, the rest of the top part, and then half of this design. And then we have the other side. Now, the reason why I didn't mind like cutting this part in half is because the idea I had was to put like a gem there. So I also kept that in mind about where I'm going to put beads and gems. I need to make sure that my cut lines are where the gems will be, because when I stitch this together, I'm going to have an edge that's visible that I need to hide behind beading. So I played around with it until I was happy with where all of my cut lines were. And then I ran some tests with some leftover blue embroidery thread that I had and just tested out the design. I broke so many needles in this design because it's my first time ever doing embroidery on my Yaya Han Bernina sewing machine, and one of my first times doing any sort of machine embroidery. I've played around a little bit with it, but I have not used it in any sort of cosplay, and I also have not made my own custom design before. So this was all a first for me. So I've always purchased pre-made designs. I found that there are certain things that my machine doesn't like, such as does not like puffing, this puffing right here. So you can see that it's nice and thick. Once it gets to this certain amount of thickness and it's making these longer stitches, something happens and it pulls the needle and my needle breaks. And I had puffing all over this thing. So because of that, and I wanted to stop breaking so many needles, I decided to eliminate the puffing in a lot of places and replace the puffing with gems, or these little gold cabochons that I found instead. Like these little circles, they were not going to be anything more than embroidery, but because my machine hated sewing them, now they're gold cabochons. And honestly, I think it looks a lot better now than the first test. So I tested again and again and again and kept making changes, such as adding fill stitching in here because I thought it was just a little too plain to leave it open. Once I got the design the way I wanted on muslin and actually used up the last little bit of muslin that I had, I decided that the design was fine and ready to go, and now I needed to start embroidering on water-soluble stabilizer. I'm sure a lot of you have seen videos of people doing embroidery, machine embroidery, on just water-soluble and stabilizer, and then they'll go and it'll be like a lace or something, and then they'll go and they'll wash away the stabilizer, and it'll just leave the sewing behind, and it looks really cool. I actually was watching a video of a lace maker, and she said that was called chemical lace, and I thought that was really cool that it actually had a name. So it's a really cool technique. So I thought that at first I would do that because I didn't want to sew this onto netting because I didn't like the way that the netting would look. Some of the netting would be visible, and I didn't like the way that that netting would look on the panel. I really wanted to stitch directly on the red. So I tried out that technique, and I'm going to blame my design for being too complicated and too many stitches in one place. I could not get that to work. That water-soluble stabilizer would just fall apart, particularly in areas that had quite a bit of stitching, such as here, and it would just pull itself apart. So I tried multiple layers of the water-soluble stabilizer, and it would get a little bit further, but it would keep failing. So I tried lining that with tearaway stabilizer. So I did tearaway and water-soluble, and it still fell apart. I tried just tearaway stabilizer. It would just fall apart. So I decided I needed to sew it onto fabric. That was the only way I could keep it from falling apart. So it took me a really, really long time to find the fabric I wanted, and I wound up going with this gold rame, which is the best decision I think I have made. This light gold, it has some sparkles to it. It is really beautiful. It's a little difficult to work with. If you iron it, it gets a little sticky because it does feel a little plasticky. So I'm afraid to iron it too much. I think it'll melt. And honestly, if it gets a little too hot, you start to pull off some of this shine. Bought like a whole bolt from Mood Fabrics. It wasn't badly priced either, so I actually really, really like this. However, this fabric, it's incredibly tightly woven, but this design still pulls it apart. So I tried a tearaway stabilizer, and the tearaway stabilizer failed, and which led to this fabric failing. So I was running out of ideas, and I finally ran across something called an adhesive stabilizer, and I bought a roll of it from Amazon, and it is really, really neat. It is really neat. It's just like a big sticker. So I looked at a few tutorials on how to use it, and I've seen a couple different ways of doing it where you roll out what you need, you peel the cover off so that you show the stickiness, and then you put your fabric down and then you hoop it like normal, or, and this is the technique I wound up doing, you put the stabilizer down and you remove the stickiness and you stick one part of your hoop to that, and then you finish hooping the stabilizer only, and then you take a piece of your fabric and you stick it on top. Do not capture that fabric within the hoop. And I found that was the easiest way to hoop it, and I found that that worked best. It allowed me to get my fabric super smooth on top, and it allowed me to cut smaller pieces of fabric out of the rame so I could conserve more of the fabric that I needed. This stuff works very, very well. Rarely fails, at least for my design. I do have some times where the embroidery in the leaves does start to pull and rip through both the fabric and the adhesive stabilizer, but I think the adhesive on the stabilizer kept it from fully failing, and I just covered those areas up with gems. So it's really cool. It's very sticky, and it's technically a tearaway, but, and I'm still questioning if this was an intelligent decision or not, rather than tearing this away, I decided to leave the backing on it. So when I cut out all of my pieces, don't have a third one cut out right now, but I have two. So when I cut out all my pieces, it still has the stabilizer on the back. And then I just really liked the stiffness and structure it allowed, and then it allowed for this part to remain smooth. Piece it together as I need to. I will say that I have found in leaving it on here, some things happen I don't like. Because I'm doing so much hand beading on top of it, it does wind up eventually wrinkling, and that I can't get out. I don't think I can iron it. I know I can't iron the rame to as hot as I want it to, but also I don't know that I can iron the stabilizer. I haven't tried it yet. So instead of being able to fix the wrinkles, they're kind of just there. So what I'm going to do to try and hide some of the wrinkling I have up here is I have found some clear sequins, and I think I'm going to fill in these open areas with this clear sequins. It was not my original plan because I do really like the open area. It gives a nice break to everything going on, but I think I'm going to have to do something like that because I just can't fix the wrinkling. And I only really noticed it once I was like 3 panels in, so I can't go back and fix it because everything is sewn together. And I'm to a point where I am not restarting these. Once I had everything embroidered, I had to embroider it in 3 different pieces. Once I had all 3 of my pieces embroidered, I took them off the hoop and they look like this. And then I would go through and I would cut out very carefully around the edges to make sure that I didn't snip any of the embroidery thread, but left just enough fabric so that I could sew right up against the edge without going into the embroidery. I make sure to leave a little extra fabric around here so that when I layer them on top, I have more of an anchor when I put them together. So how do I put these together? Well, I found that the easiest way to do it is before I even put it on the panel, I glue them together, which is why I wound up leaving a lot of this extra fabric behind. So I take Surebonder hot glue and very, very carefully and slowly, I use just a little bit, and I put like a little glue here and I line everything up and I push it together until it's set. I use hot glue for 2 reasons. One, pins sort of mess up the design. The rame, when you put a hole in it, it leaves the hole behind. It doesn't like self-heal, and I don't think the adhesive stabilizer really helped with that, so I didn't want to poke any holes in it. And secondly, I found that if I use just a little bit of hot glue and I don't like the positioning, I can peel it apart, peel the hot glue off, and do it again. So I will use glue and I will glue all 3 pieces together. Once I have all 3 pieces lined up, I then take it to my panel, measure everything out to make sure it's in the exact right position, and once again use a little hot glue to glue it in place. It just works really well when I don't want to use pins. I additionally use a little bit of fabric glue on these smoother places and press it down in the hopes to prevent some of the wrinkling. It did not work. I have it secured to the panel. I take the panel to the sewing machine and I sew around all edges of all 3 pieces. So on this one, I go all the way around and then I come in and follow the inner lines of this piece and I go all the way around that until it is thoroughly secured. And then I go and I get to hand bead it. I hand bead around all of the edges to hide that seam, and then I've gone in and added extra embroidery and cabochons just to make it look better. And just recently, and I wasn't sure if I was going to keep this, but I actually think I'm going to now, I've decided I don't like this crosshatch being just plain stitching, so I've taken clear sequins and clear beads and I've gone in and followed the stitching on that, and I think I like it, so I think I'm going to go back through all of the panels and add that in as well. That's how I made the embroidery for my panels. It's not difficult, it's just incredibly time consuming. There is another way I could have done it. I could have embroidered it directly onto the panel, and I could have done what's called multi-hooping, where you embroider, say, the top part and then the machine stops and it places some markers and you're able to then take the panel, readjust it in the hoop, and then start embroidering again and embroider the next section and actually line it all up for you so that I could just embroider it directly onto the panel and not have to deal with this 3-piece applique nonsense. However, I tried over and over and over again to figure that out and I could not get it to work. And that's definitely a me thing and a lack of knowledge. And I will be attempting to do that in future builds when I have bigger embroidery pieces, but I feel like for multi-hooping and my limited knowledge, since this was my first time trying it, this particular design was a bit too complicated for me to kind of figure that out. So I decided to do it this way instead, which is taking far more time and far more effort, but I think the result is exactly what I wanted. So I'm very happy with how it's turning out. So that is how I made the embroidery for my panels. If you have any questions, again, put them down in the comment section below. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content from me. And with that, I will see you in my next video. Bye.